When I began sketching from the finished painting, it was important to accurately capture the character's dynamics and the overall plot of the scene. Using a B2 pencil, I outlined the basic pose, the tilt of the body, the position of the arms, and the proportions of the torso. First, I outlined the silhouette with large, soft lines, then added key elements of the costume: wide sleeves, a deep neckline, a belt with a round buckle, and folds of fabric. Next, I moved on to the head, outlining the shape of the face, the hairline, and the distinctive cap with long, soft ends. I used an eraser to adjust the tilt of the head and the curves of the shoulders several times, striving for expressiveness. Then I outlined the background, the outlines of fantasy houses, the line of the pavement, and the balloons that create a festive atmosphere. I drew everything with light lines to allow for flexibility during adjustments. Once the composition found a rhythm, I refined the contours, emphasizing those that would serve as reference points for coloring. Once the sketch was clear and confident, I began painting with acrylics. I used 3 brushes, a thin one for contours and small details, a medium one for the main shapes, and a large one for the broad surfaces and background. I worked gradually, in a sequence that preserves the purity of the drawing and the depth of color: background, clothing, hair, face, small details. I started with the background, as it sets the atmosphere, mood, and overall tone of the entire painting. Using a large brush, I applied a rich blue, allowing the brush strokes to flow freely and leave texture in places. I deliberately didn't smooth the background completely. The painterly unevenness creates a sense of air movement and a whimsical feel. Next, I moved on to the houses on the sides of the street. Mixing brown, ochre, and a touch of red, I created warm architecture that contrasts with the bright blue of the sky. I used a medium brush to draw the large shapes of the buildings, and a fine brush to emphasize the windows, roof lines, and slanted walls. This enhanced the fairy tale-like quality of the street. I added the balloons carefully, using small brush strokes, so they would appear as subtle accents. Then I worked on the character's clothing. Warm orange became the main color of the costume, and I applied it with a medium brush, gradually increasing the density of the color. To emphasize volume, I used darker shades of orange in the folds, and lighter shades in the raised areas of the fabric. Acrylic allowed me to work in layers, so the clothing turned out rich and textured. I tried to depict the sleeves with loose, lively brushstrokes to convey the softness of the fabric. I worked on the belt and buckle in detail. First the overall color, then the shadows. And only after it had completely dried did I apply thin black lines for the contours. I moved on to the hair. First, I filled the entire space with a reddish-brown tone with a medium brush. Then I enhanced individual strands with deeper shades and added highlights with subtle strokes. This made the hair look vibrant, as if illuminated by the sun. I made the transitions carefully, allowing the hair to interact with the bright background and headdress. The most delicate stage was the face. I started with a base nude shade, applied thinly so as not to obscure the soft lines. I added light pink and peach undertones on the cheeks and around the nose. I drew the lips in layers, creating soft volume. I paid special attention to the eyes. Acrylic can quickly cover excess, so I worked with a thin brush and carefully. I maintained the stylized, look-long lashes, expressive eyelids, and a slightly pensive gaze. The neck and collarbone area also required nuance. I added soft shadows to make the body look natural. The yellow cap is a key element that sets the character's mood. First, I applied the main bright shade and then added soft shadows with the green-brown tone. I made the tips of the cap darker. I tried to maintain the decorative effect and lightness. I drew the necklace with the heart with a thin brush, emphasizing its symbolism. In the final stage, I returned to all the elements requiring clarity with a thin brush. I drew contours, folds, hairs, pavement lines, and house windows. I added subtle accents with white paint highlights on clothing and objects. This gave the painting a finished look. I reinforced some lines with a black outline to give the style a more graphic expression. Critical assessment of the painting. What went well? The painting is bright, dynamic, with a strong, stylized character. The atmosphere of the fairy tale town is conveyed well. The warm houses, street vistas, and balloons create a festive mood. The character's headdress and costume are expressive and work harmoniously with the background. The contour graphics emphasize the illustrative style. What could be improved? The character's face is a bit simplified, more volume, and soft shadows could be added for expression. The perspective of the pavement is a bit off. It could be made more directional. The color transitions on the arms and legs could be smoothed out to avoid a flat feel. In some places, the outline is too thick, which makes the details lose their lightness. What could be added? Highlights on the hair and clothing for more volume. Light shadows under the character to help them stand firmly on the pavement. A few architectural details: windows, signs, and patterns. Painting style: a mix of fantasy illustration, graphic comics, and pop art. This painting will appeal to those who enjoy vibrant scenes, fantasy characters, large decorative lines, unique color schemes, and the atmosphere of medieval fairy tale towns.